This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Jacquie Elliott. I hope I got your first name right. I'm assuming is
Correct.
that correct?
Yeah,
Good,
that's
good.
correct.
So I want to thank you and welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. We
Well,
are a
thank you for
featured
inviting
podcast
me.
on. Oh well, we love to have new people on the show all the time. So I love to talk to different creators and people have visions of what they want or what the services they provide. And so it's really great to have you on the show today. But what I wanted to tell people is like we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. And I see that icon up that says Newsly. That's a podcast platform. That's an audio platform. Right now we're video, but for that audience that wants to listen on audio, we have a coupon code below. It says Ghost. If you use Ghost, you get 1 month free premium subscription on that actual platform. Now, other than that, I want to actually let people know that this is episode 1002 of our podcast. We've been on the air since 2016, tracking on Apple Podcast. And what we're going to talk about today is the ABCs of abusive brain chatter with you. You can tell your story of how you came up with that concept. So I can take the floor, maybe give the audience a little background into what you do as a certified life coach and motivational speaker.
So, yeah, I'm a certified life, spiritual, and relationship coach. And one of the things that would come up when I started coaching is people's negative talk. A lot of times when we would be coaching, they would be, I do a process of voice dialogue where I allow both all their parts of themselves to speak. And often there's this really abusive side. And I know that because I had that. That was something that, well, we all have that. I mean, the reality is there are times when our brain says mean things to us. And for me, it was crippling. And it was just so crippling. It would tell me I was not good enough. I wasn't a good mother. I could never earn money. I was never going to find the love of my life, that, I was going to be single mother and divorced forever. It was saying these really, really mean things. And the truth is because of my background, it was kind of normalized for me. My parents never spoke to me that way. I was never abused in that manner, but the things that they told me, the way they reacted to me, um, led me to have low self-esteem. And the low
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem then just grew and grew and grew until finally one day it had become larger than me. It had become larger than the Jacquie that was inside of me. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't believe these things. I can't talk this way to myself. I need help. And I knew that was the most important thing, is knowing that the abusive brain chatter was so loud for me that I had no voice to counteract it. In other words, if it said, you're not good enough, I didn't have a voice inside of me that said, oh yes, you're perfectly good. You're a beautiful soul. I just couldn't access that. And that was what I call my aha moment. And it led me on a spiritual journey, not a religious journey, but a spiritual journey, which kind of, I believe, led me to myself, my inner self, my higher power, my higher guidance. And then when I was working with clients and I saw it show up in clients, I realized, this is something I need to help people with this. Uh, that's why I decided to write the book on it, because I started looking around and seeing how many people have abusive brain chatter. Now, the statistics are really high, that we all say negative things. In fact, I think in a daytime, what is it, like 6,000 thoughts are negative. We all have it. But I think what really struck me was how normalized it was, how normal it is to go out with a group of women and have them talk badly about themselves, about their body, about about their weight, about finding a man, about their work life, about their career. And everybody just kind of goes along with it. Like, that's what we do. We kind of bash
Yeah.
ourselves and, and that's accepted. And I just kind of wanted to start a movement that said, no, this is emotional abuse. If we think about the chatter in our head as emotional abuse, suddenly it doesn't become fun anymore. Suddenly it
Yeah.
becomes really painful. And so that's really how I kind of got into this. And it was, it's been just really a learning journey for me that I want to share with others.
Well, I work with creative people, and creative people have a lot of negativity in terms of they wanted perfection, and I'm always a big purveyor of the happy accident, or that there are no bad notes and there are opportunities, right? So if you start to look at things as like all the songs that you don't show people because you're scared to show people because they're you, right? And a lot of times people are scared to show something that is uniquely themselves because they want to belong. So they want to clone somebody else. They want to copy somebody else. They don't want to be their authentic self because if somebody says they don't like it, they take it too personal. So then people put themselves in a box and they don't really show who they are. They don't feel comfortable being who they are. So they spend all their time trying to sound like somebody else. They're trying to be like somebody else. They're trying to project somebody else. And I've always told people, like, I want to hear the song that you're scared to show anybody, because that's the song that to me is the thing worth working on, because that
Right.
is going to get you out there with your unique voice. That's why people like singer-songwriters, because they have their own voice. They're not singing something that somebody else wrote for them. Now, that's fine. Somebody can do that, and you have to learn how to feel that, like an actor feels the script. But it's different when you actually work on something that's you. I think
Right.
that's where people are scared. I find people are all, even professional musicians are scared to show you that thing that they don't want to show anybody.
Yeah, what a great point, because that's one of the things I say is that abusive brain chatter, one of the damages that it does is it blocks creativity. There's probably so many people out there, exactly what you said, Phantom, that are wonderful, that have a wonderful song, or that is a wonderful poet, or has a beautiful painting, but they have that inner critic, and that inner critic is really, it's meant to protect us in kind of a funny way, because we don't want to get hurt, so we don't want to look foolish, right? You want that song. If I show you that song and you kind of go, eh, well,
Yeah,
I'm going to be devastated. So this abusive brain chatter says, that's terrible. Don't show it to anybody. No, protect yourself at all costs. And
yeah,
pretty soon we do exactly what emotional abusers want us to do. They want us to isolate, and they want us to stay quiet and shut down. That's what an emotional abuser does. They bully us, they belittle us, they isolate us, all kinds of ways to keep us back. And that, for creative people, I when I'm writing my book, I have a chapter about that, because it's like, you have so much to give. Don't let abusive brain chatter rob us of you. And so you really hit the nail on the head with that one.
well, it's the vulnerability. Yeah, I think that's the problem. Is like you have a defense mechanism to protect yourself, right? So you want to protect yourself, but artistry typically is something where it comes from the vulnerability, it comes from authenticity, and the thing is, we take it personal. So if I
Yeah.
go and do something that's on the bleeding edge or the cutting edge, well, guaranteed no one's heard it. So people don't think it's right because they haven't heard that. So then what people like to say is correct is what they've heard before. And if you do something that wasn't heard before, the natural inclination of a lot of people is to say, well, that's no good. And then you take it personal and then you put it away. And that's why people don't raise their hands. People don't
Yeah.
speak up. Because they're scared to be the person that's going to have something that's not the known fact. I'm always looking for what they call newfound sounds,
Mm-hmm.
which means
Mm-hmm.
if it's newfound sound, like of course nobody is going to know what to do with it, but that's the fun of it. But some people that's really hard. It's hard to find the newfound thing and be a purveyor of that because there's a lot of risk and people
Well,
don't are risk averse.
right. And like you said, the authentic self. So a lot of the work I do in my life coaching, well, really more in my spiritual coaching, is doing guided meditations and um, uh, writing and journaling to find that authentic self. Because once you've found that authentic self, uh, you then come from a place of that of being who you really are, and it doesn't matter what other people think. You're really okay with, oh, okay, this is a gift that was given to me and I express it this way, and that's okay, and what you think of me is none of my business. That's part of the ABC, you know, challenging, because if we are on our side of the street, where I
Mhm.
call it our bowling lane, where there's a bowling alley and then there's these little bumpers for kids on your
Yeah.
bowling lane. If we are on our side of the street, what somebody else is throwing over there, if they're throwing strikes or whatever, means nothing to me. And if their ball comes over into my lane, it's their problem, not mine. But if I start wondering what they're thinking, if I start like going over into their lane and going, what are they bowling? Oh, look, there's a split, then I've
Yeah.
lost myself. I've lost my authentic self. So a lot of the work that I do is finding who you are and then honoring that. And I think that's a real important part of releasing abusive brain chatter.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for people to find who they are if they've been taught that they're not good enough, or they're taught that like, well, artistry is nothing. You need to have a real job, and if you have a dream, well, you got to stay within the box. Like, so people want to put people in the cubicle, in the box, in the structure that they know, or their family knows, or their religious organization knows, and you're stuck. But you're only stuck as far as like a lot of times we put the glass ceiling on ourselves. Like abusive brain chatter is like, well, I can't if I can't play like Jimi Hendrix, I shouldn't play guitar. So,
Right.
well, that's a falsehood because Jimmy's not here. So you're gonna play the way you play, right? So why put that type of thing on yourself? It's like I've seen so many musicians put that kind of thing on themselves. Like if they can't reach this, then they're no good. And then they never go outside their room. I'm like, well, how are you gonna be out there if you're not gonna go outside the room?
It's funny because I really see that as a spiritual issue, because it's arrogance. When I start getting in my own way of my creativity, even writing my book, when I get into my head and I start going, this is going to be the best book ever, and what if people read it and they go, oh, that's stupid, and I do that. We all do that, but I've learned to challenge that. And I've learned that it's arrogance for me to think that I'm writing that book. When I'm in a spiritual place, when I'm in a place of complete centeredness and groundedness and quiet, then it comes through me.
Yeah,
And it just comes out so much better. It's like, okay, throw out that voice for a little while. Let's just shut you off, okay? And now
yeah,
let it travel through you, and then you realize that you are just channeling.
yeah.
You're
It's the
you're not
muse.
that big, exactly. You're not that. My God, you're not the Beethoven of the world, the Mozart, but you are somebody who has something to give the world. And if you get out of your own way, the world will be better for it. And to me, that's the place we come from. How do I make this a better place?
Yeah, 'cause I mean that's why, I'm a child of the '70s, and I was really kind of enamored with the punk movement when it started because it kind of set a whole new frame. Because then you
Mhm.
get bands like the Ramones and Blondie and the Clash, and it was like you don't have to have perfect pitch. You don't have to be the best player. You don't have to be Jimmy Page. You don't have to be John Bonham. You don't have to be these guys like the Beatles. And there was this
Right.
whole idea where you had to be like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles. You have to be this A1 top shelf artist. And then the punk aesthetic said, no, you can have heart, you can have ideas, you can not even have a best voice. But if you've got the gumption to just get in front of people and to show your idea, and that to me was revolutionary. And it kind of brought out new wave and got into hip hop and rap. And people said, well, yeah, I don't have to be a musician to write music. I just have to feel it. And then I
Right.
thought it's revolutionary why we have a lot of the forms of music we have today with EDM and techno and producers that were never musicians at all. And then you're like, they're creating music because music is like inside of people and you
Right.
can create it whether you were trained or not. Right. And that's what the big thing is that people, you don't have to go to Berkeley. You can feel it.
Hmm.
And that's what the blues guys did. Delta Blues, did they go to Berkeley? No. Those Delta blues like Lead Belly and Robert Johnson, they felt the blues. They created the blues. They weren't trained. It came from the muse. It came from the universe. It came from like a flow state. The idea that you can tap into what's there. And every human
Right.
being has the ability. It's just that you limit yourself by feeling that you're not a professional, you're not this and you're not that, so you can't do it. And I think people
Right.
do that outside of music. Like they prevent themselves from being an entrepreneur, from owning their own, for doing what they really want to do. Doing, I think the great resignation seemed to like people say, yeah, maybe I can do what I want. Maybe I can stop the 9 to 5, get an Etsy shop and do what I want, and then, and you start seeing people do it.
Right. And that is why it's so important to understand abusive brain chatter. And that's why I came up with the ABCs, because it's not a fix it, but it's, for me, it's a reminder when I'm writing and I start going, uh, oh God, that's a horrible, somebody's gonna challenge you on that. And it's a memoir, so how can somebody really challenge me, right? It's my life, it's my story, it's
Yeah,
what I've learned
it's
from my
you.
life, right? So when I start hearing that, then I have these ABCs, and the first one is awareness. So I become aware, and I start going, wow, Jackie, there it goes. You're listen to what you're saying, listen to how that you're talking to yourself. What is that? Is that bullying? Is that belittling? Is that uh, diminishing yourself? Is that gaslighting? And pretty soon I start going, yeah, okay, that is belittling, and that thinking that I can't write a book, or that's a very belittling thought. So I don't really want to have that thought. Well, now what do I do? So now I understand that my head is doing this, and I sometimes it gets out of control and I can't stop it. So, what's the next step? The next step is the important step that you were just talking about, is to go inside and find a muse. I love that for creative people, a higher self, somebody who's going to get you to where you want to be, somebody who's an energy that's greater than the negative energy that you're being fed in your head. So I take some time and I pause and I tune into, I might tune into, my spiritual, whatever I call higher power, or
Mhm.
I might tap into my little soul that I've really come across and realize who Jackie is. And Jackie's really a healer and she's a creator. And I might tap into that voice and I allow that voice to come forward. And that's the way that it'll quiet. Once I become aware, I allow the voice to come forward now. That is the higher voice. And the muse is a great, if you can
Yeah,
find a muse, and, just even it can be a bird on a wing, or, I
yeah,
take people on meditations, guided meditations, to find that muse, that voice, that spirit, whatever it is that's going to lift them out of their abusive brain chatter. But then the third part of it is the C, which is challenge your core belief.
mhm,
And, Phantom, you were talking about the core beliefs that we have, and I was telling you that in my case, my parents didn't say I was bad, I was awful, but they had beliefs that they put on me, that it was important to get married, important to have a man. And if you want to get a man, it was important to look good. And so those were beliefs that I held. So if I failed at any of those, then I was a failure. And then my abusive brain chatter would chatter at me. So, I got into a series of bad relationships because my core belief was that it was better to be in a bad relationship than to be without a
Be alone.
relationship.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And so, like I said, my parents didn't mean to give me that. That was just my mother's belief and my father's belief that marriage is important and that women should be married. So, that's what I'm saying. I had to go through and challenge that and say, yeah, is that really true? You can be an author.
It's like a
Why do you?
social moray. I was a sociology major, and the whole idea they had to get the macrocosm, you have the microcosm, right? So the microcosm is like your individual and maybe your family, and
Right,
in the macrocosm is greater society. And so within, they kind of bleed into each other. So if you've got like social mores that say, well, for women, being married and be with a man, that's what you have to do. And there's the generations of people felt that way in multiple cultures. And they put
right.
this, kind of restriction on
And if you don't
women.
fit in, right? If you don't
You-
fit in, then suddenly chatter, chatter, chatter,
yeah,
right?
you only can actualize with your partner. You can't actualize by yourself, which is
Right.
like that's the false narrative.
Yeah.
And because there's a kind of patriarchal structure that's saying that we don't want women competing with men, and we don't want women thinking they can run a business. We want them to stay in this box and stay in this zone. And I mean, it's you can get the politics of it, but the whole thing is that yeah, there's a lot of people that are in that mindset, and so until they can get out of it, they won't actually be happy because they
Right.
start to hit the wall with like, this is supposed to make me happy, but it doesn't. So then they
Right.
start to challenge, like, well, if this is such a perfect thing, then why am I not happy?
Right.
So
And what am
then,
I
then,
telling
then
myself?
yeah, because it's
Right.
not
What am I
perfect if you're
telling
not
myself
happy.
about that thing? Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. It's if you're not what, if it is, it's starting with, oh, what am I saying to myself about this? That I'm not good enough. Well, that's where we start with that awareness. And then, like I said, we tap into that other voice. And then, as you said, society and all, we have to challenge all those things that not only our parents told us, but that society is telling us. Your parents may have said being a musician is not good, or you're
Yeah.
never going to be, you should be a scientist or whatever. You're never going to make money at that. Well, suddenly, you're going to, if you start going against that and you don't challenge that, that's definitely going to hold you back. Like, who am I? That imposter syndrome. I think that's the perfect word for what you're talking about in terms of creativity. It's an imposter syndrome that, wow, well, I'm not a Beethoven. I'm not a, jazzy Jay-Z or
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not into that kind of
Yeah.
music,
Yeah.
but
Well,
whatever.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the problem. There's so much comparison. No
Yeah,
matter what art you're in, you have these people that are like, they're the archetypes of the genre, right? Or
right.
they're in the canon, right? So like start getting into the canon, and everybody starts thinking, well, there's no way I'm in there. Like if you're Hemingway, then you start
Mhm.
saying, you start talking about different people in canons, Miles Davis, Hendrix, Prince, Janis Joplin. You get these people in the canons, like, well, if you can't get anywhere near them, then why are you even here? And then people start to really go down on themselves. And my whole my thing is like you should let yourself be free to explore like the present moment in a kind of a flow state. And we're so creative that
Mm,
you're not allowing the world to hear your gift. Because a lot of
right.
times the things come out of left field is these people weren't brilliant. They just decided to work. They decided to be present. They started, and then then you find it's like, wow, that's brilliant to you, but it's like that's this inherently who they are, and they're willing to go there. And
Right.
if you choose to do that, you can find you don't have to match this icon. You can find a way to be brilliant within your own capabilities, and then that brings out a lot of, like when you put yourself out in the world, you get an audience. Your book gets an audience, your film gets an audience, and maybe it's not at the level of this other person, but it still gets into the world, and the world is so big today
Right.
that you can actually do pretty well. And so the idea that you shouldn't even try, that's the problem.
Right. And that's such a painful thing. I took a fused glass. I did fused glass for many years. And the first class I took with this teacher, she said, okay, now I want you to make the worst piece possible. You're going to make a bad piece of art. So whatever, that's what we're going to do. Your job is to make a bad piece of art. Just throw whatever you want down there, whatever pieces of glass, and we're just going to get that out of the way. Well, that's the piece that's hanging on my wall because that's the best piece I've ever done. When I had the freedom
Yeah, you never
to
know.
do something
Freedom,
bad,
yeah, the
exactly,
happy
when
accident.
my chatter wasn't going on about it being perfect. It was like, oh, let me throw this on there. Oh, let me throw this on there. And then pretty soon it was fused and it was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So again, being able to quiet that voice, the artist's way. Judith Cameron talks about that, how to quiet that critic, the inner critic. And I think the first chapter is on your critic and finding out whose voice it is and who told you that. And that's kind of the challenging that I'm talking about.
Yeah, because I was like watching this documentary with Orson Welles, and everybody says how brilliant Citizen Kane was, and he came out and said, "I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what wasn't possible, so I did things that people said, well, you shouldn't do that. Well, I didn't know you couldn't do it, so I had camera angles and did things with cameras that people said, well, that's really innovative." So the reason it happened because I didn't think nobody told me I couldn't do it. So
Mhm.
I thought I could. He had this idea. Well, like if I can see something with my eyes, I'm going to make the camera do the same thing. And people
Mhm.
were saying, well, that's revolutionary. Well, it was just nobody told me I couldn't do it. So I did it.
Right.
And
Right.
and, and that's where sometimes like if you go to an art school and you learn the canon, sometimes you're a slave to the canon. Like, but like the people who are innovators decide to break the rules. They decide they're like, well, I'm informed by the canon, but I don't have to do it that way. I could go do something else. I could cross genre. I could turn something inside out. I could refract it, change it, like challenge it. And a lot of people, they don't want to do that because they think they got to be perfect. And
Yeah,
to me, perfection is the enemy of creativity because
that's exactly,
then you're just
yeah.
going to repeat what's done before, and who wants that? I'd rather see something new.
Well, that's why that whole idea of create something bad. Before you sit down to write a piece of music, write the worst piece of music you can imagine. And
Yeah,
maybe that'll help you. It's just like, okay, you're going to write the good piece, but this piece is going to be really, you're going to do things with the music and the tones and the beat, whatever. You're going to just challenge mainstream and then get that out of your system. And then maybe you find a little seed in there, and that's the seed you can build on. So
it's that flow
yeah,
state.
it's
It's the flow
yeah.
state because a lot of people, like, when they have a hard time to get the procrastination, they don't start. But if you embrace the flow state, you don't tend to run into that procrastination. I mean, that's why I have a bedroom studio. I have a bedroom
Mhm,
studio because if I get an idea, I can just jump and do it. With
mhm,
some people, they put the studio really far away from them, so then
mhm,
they can only go to it once in a while. But I
mhm,
have it like where it's here all the time because I
mhm,
find that, like, I get ideas all the time. And if I had to go to it, then I probably wouldn't do it, and then I wouldn't put it down. And so
yeah,
it's like if you put barriers to your process, you say, "Well, I can only be here, and I can only be there," and then you don't do it because you kind of push it off. But if you embrace that, yeah, I could be creating things like all the time, and
mhm.
why not? But some people say, "Oh, I can only be in this state to do it." But I think you have to challenge the things that stop you.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that's so important about this is that creativity. I often find clients who are depressed, and if they're creative people, I'll ask them, have you been creating? Have you been doing your art? No, I haven't been doing my art. Creativity, when creativity is blocked in us, it starts to turn against us. We start feeling depressed. And if we just get out of it if we just put pen to paper and do something creative, we feel good. That's why, I'll give an assignment to somebody. Yeah, well, this week you're going to pull out your crayons and you're just going to draw words on a page and, make it into a flower. That's all you're going to do, or whatever you're going to do. Get it unblocked. Keep it unblocked. It's use it or lose it. Well, you don't really lose it, but if you block it, like you said, if you don't do it today, then you don't do it tomorrow, then that voice is, you're not really going to do it. You're never going to do it. But know that if you do it, you're building on it. That's really an act of healing. And if you're depressed right now, if anybody who's watching this is depressed, get out some finger paints, get out some jewels, do something creative, go on a walk and pick rocks or leaves and come back home and glue them on a page. That gets you flowing and more into the flow. Because you're right. Once you stop that flow, that turns against you.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I like. I mean, I live in New Hampshire, and I like to go out for walks in the pines. And it's kind of like the famous poet is like, "Oh, nature is the cathedral." And I really get revitalized when I walk on the river trail for the Merrimack River. And if I just walk through that trail close to my house, I just embrace, Gaia. I embrace the nature, and I get tons of ideas just doing that. And it's like sometimes I'll come back and walk back and I'll take a voice memo of what I experienced, or take a little video of the woods and listening to the Merrimack River or the birds, and then take that moment and kind of use it to help me. Or even the memory of that moment will trigger something as a poem. And then that triggers like a passage, and then I'll go on the keys and I'll write. But it's like that type of thing. Like you could be creative with cooking, with like sewing, with it's all whatever is easy for you to get into. I think art therapy is really important to kind of get past the blocks, because the creativity is like creation kind of thing that a lot of people tie it to, like, creation is like sexuality too, but people get hung up on whether they can actually create. And it's a block. It can be a block in your life, because like if you're stuck in that, you get stuck in other things. You get stuck with your job, you get stuck with your relationship, you get stuck in all these other areas because you can't get past that creation process. Like you're stagnant.
Right. And that's why that believe is so important of the ABCs. The finding that space that you said, nature, for you, Gaia. For me, it's meditation in the bathtub gets my brain going. And sometimes I can't even, I have to get out and write down so much that it's like crazy. And people always say to me, God, your brain is always going. You're full of ideas. And that's because I'm open. Opened. I wasn't full of ideas. I really, this is an important point, Phantom, that I was depressed and I was in bed watching TV. That's who I was. I was so turned inward. I was binging on food. I was binging on TV, and I had severe asthma. I couldn't breathe because I was I was just all here, just allowing that chatter to hold me in here.
Chatter,
Yeah. And I just couldn't. And finally, when I realized that, wait a minute, I have an authentic self. Let me find her. Let me release her. Well, people, I can't tell you how many times people say, wow, you are the creative ideas. They just flow from you. And it's like, because I let them. That's why, because I don't hold them back. And I realize that there's going to be some wins and some losses. I'm trying to do a TEDx talk and I haven't gotten picked yet. Well, okay, maybe I never will. That's just the way it is. But then I have another idea, and then I have another idea. And it's just, it's unblocking it. If anybody there is feeling blocked, find where the opening is. If it's meditation, call me, text me. I'll guide you through a meditation
Yeah.
to find it. Because that's the most important thing, is finding that flow.
But I think a lot of people sometimes they get stuck in their logic brain, and then you tell them about spiritual practice, or you tell them about things as like in the muse, and they kind of look at you and roll their eyes and say, "Well, I'm not into that foo-foo stuff," But that's part of the block, because
Right.
if the part of the kind of flow state is embracing stuff that's not exactly logical, right? There's
Right.
some things, that, especially in the creative mind, there's part of it is the rhythm and the meter. That's logical. Okay, that
Yeah.
3, 4 times, 6, 8 times. That's logical, right? The structure, being in tune, in the key, that's logical. But the feeling that you put into the note, the feeling that you put into to the melody, that's human. That's the art. That's the passion. And there is a structure, but there's dissonance, and it kind of and there's this kind of creative flow that comes in, and it's not exactly logical. It's passion.
Right.
And so that some people don't believe in that, or they don't know how to attain that, or they can't get into the creation mode because they've been denying themselves the freedom to do it, because they think there's something wrong with it. It seems like a lot of times there's like shame about that, so they can't get into it because they're in a shame mode, they're in a guilt mode, they're in a blame mode. They blame themselves. They blame others. You got to get past those hangups to get into that state, and then you would find that the things do come to you all a lot. The creative people I deal with, they tend to have a lot of ideas constantly, and I'm like, why? It's because they've opened themselves to that muse idea, or the universe,
Exactly.
or however
Yes.
they feel it.
And it's important to challenge when you're not, when if you're in your head. I became a life coach first because I really believe in, to me, life coaching is about helping people with their future. Therapy is kind of digging in the past, archaeology, but they say life coaching is architecture. You're kind of wanting, so what do you want to be? Let's help you get there. But what I found was that so many people, Phantom, were up in their head. And we
Mm,
would talk about things and they would just stay in their head. Well, I learned that they'd want to get into the whole therapy part of it. Well, my parents and this and that, my grandma and all of that. And until I could just say, okay, let's just quiet your mind for a moment. Let's put that aside. And now how about if we just drop into your body, and what color are you feeling? And people sometimes, especially men, they'll go, color, I don't know, I'm not seeing a color. And I'll say, no, just go with me here. It's that, this, I know it's woo woo, but just hear me out, go with me, let's go. And then they'll go, okay, well, maybe I'm seeing kind of a red tight knot. Okay, let's stay with that knot. Where's that coming from, and what does it need? And so we allow it to speak from, not from up here, because when they start speaking to me from up here, it just shuts them up. But when they start speaking to me from down here and telling me, oh,
mm,
it's just needing, to be loved, to be heard, to be expressed, suddenly then now, aha, now we can get somewhere. And that's why that spiritual piece was so important to me, to in order to help people, because that's where, you're right, that's exactly where it lives. And again, forget the process, forget the word God, Gaia, whatever,
yeah.
forget the word, use the tool to find yourself again. And that's really an important part of change. And I can tell you that your inner self, to the people who haven't yet found that your inner self really wants to come out and sing and dance. I mean, put on
Yeah.
some music, and just dance the night away. Nina Simone's, it's a new day. I mean,
Yeah.
is that not a great song to put on and let your muse come
Well, it's
out?
a whole thing. Well, the thing is, like, a lot of people don't realize, like, your heartbeat is a frequency, right? Your
Yes.
electric energy. And being a musician, one of the things that we've learned as musicians that we can tap into those frequencies, and people
Yeah.
can, the vibe. And when you're a musician and you play in front of the audience, you see the immediate impact of your art because you put out frequencies and rhythms and people react to them immediately. You get immediate feedback from your work. And
Wow.
it feels very powerful and it's very addictive. Like if you're playing in front of an audience and I'm like a fusion jazz band and we're
Uh-huh.
getting the audience into it, and we'll go into dissonance and we'll go into melody and we'll go into kind of frenetic things, and we get to see the crowd react to the different emotions we're putting out and the frequencies we're putting out, and we can see it in real time. And I think, public speakers can see that when you've got the crowd. If you're a comedian, you've got the crowd, or you don't have the crowd, or you're an actor, you have the crowd, or you don't have it. It's the same kind of idea because you're still using your voice as the frequency because your voice
Right.
is an instrument. It's the same idea. And a lot of people don't understand how much power you have with your voice and in the vibes you put out, right? The nonverbal things you put out are frequencies. And so, when you start to get in alignment with, oh, there's things that you can hear, there's things you can't hear. There's nonverbal things that happen. And it's all still all frequency. And it's
Mm-hmm.
all about kind of getting into this kind of connectedness with people, understanding that you can, law of attraction, you can drive people away, you can bring people to you. Depends on what kind of vibe you're putting out.
And just imagine what you explained was so beautiful of how the audience reacts. And imagine if you were so in your head that you were just thinking about the notes. Do you think you would have the same result in the audience?
No, I think some musicians kind of make mistakes where they totally just focus on their instrument.
Uh-huh.
And what we try to tell people, like when you get, more evolved as a musician, is you have to understand, like you have a muscle memory. You don't have to be just paying attention to that. You kind of have to just experience the whole moment, which is not just your instrument and your fingers on it or your mouth on the reed or something. It's that whole moment, which includes the room, the people in the room, your bandmates, the audience, everything. So that atmosphere is part of your performance. And when you realize that, that's the difference when you get people who are really connecting. When
Right.
you have a musician that understands that, then you will see that they are really connected and the audience is connected. And they say, well, yeah, they're on fire. It's like, how is that? Because they're embracing that whole moment. They're not just totally in their head or totally on the instrument. And it's,
Right.
you have it's something you learn or you don't learn.
Well,
But
that's where that abusive brain chatter, where that holds people back. See, you are giving a gift. When you're telling me this, I'm imagining sitting in the audience with my eyes closed and just feeling it. And that's a gift that you're giving me. And if you are saying to yourself, oh, look what she's doing. I wonder if she's liking this. I wonder if you aren't giving me that gift. You've taken back my gift. And so that's a great thing for musicians to know, is that if you really want to give your gift, you give your gift and don't take ownership of it. You are a musician, and this beautiful sound comes through you, down through your body, but not up in your head. It stays up in your head. And it's like any kind of imposter syndrome or anything, stay out of your head.
yeah, it was like
And
the Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead used to say, like in those happenings that the Dead used to do, is like, you know, those aren't performances; those are like connected happenings. You know,
exactly.
because that's the way they looked at it. And when you get bands, like there are certain bands that they understand that.
Yeah.
Like a band like Bob Marley and the Wailers, they got that. It's the same kind of idea. And you get groups that figure out that connectedness with the audience, and there's like a two-way street, and they're feeling it, and then you're, wow, that's a real beautiful moment. And I think it happens in all kinds of art, when
Yeah.
and even in your daily life as a human being. Like if you're at work and you connect the moments and you don't get stuck in your head,
Hmm.
you're gonna perform better
Yeah.
if you're not thinking of, if you're actually in the present, listening to everybody instead of thinking about what the next thing you should say is. actually listen to your coworkers, listening to the meeting, understanding it, and embracing it in a moment instead of so scared of failure or so scared of this and scared of that you're not actually embracing that present moment.
Right.
So you're not
Right.
really connected.
No, absolutely. And I'd like to just offer some tips, some help for people who find themselves stuck in their head. I call it tornado head because you start in your head and it just starts taking you all the way, and you're gone. Pretty soon you're not in Kansas anymore. You know, your head's taking you in a tornado. What I say is, first, start becoming aware of what you're saying to yourself. Write it down. Just as you're practicing, or you're writing a song, or you're trying to write a poem, write down what your brain is telling you. It's saying, "Oh, this isn't good. Oh, no one will like," whatever it says. Just allow it. Just be like I always say, like one of those anthropologists who are just taking notes on the behavior of a chimpanzee. Oh, this is interesting. This is what Jackie's doing. She's thinking she's not good enough, blah, blah, blah. So that's the first step. The second part is find your inner self. What would that inner self say to you in that moment? And then discover, the first part of being aware is also understanding what is that? Is that abuse? Is that bullying, belittling? What am I doing to myself? That's the first part, understanding emotional abuse, the signs. And then the second part is then writing down the belief, what the inside, what you really believe, what your muse believes, and just start writing from that point of view. So I'm good. It's beautiful. Music is wonderful. My gift needs to be sent to whatever it is that you need to say. And then the third part is challenge your core belief. Where did that belief come from? Is that really true? Just start challenging it and bring it. Is that true? Where did that come from? Am I afraid? And all of those things. And those are it's just a quick ABCs, but that's going to get you started. And certainly writing the opposite of what you think is another, an opposite, a positive thing.
That's another technique. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good. Well, I think also one of the things I was reading is like the question I didn't get to, but what can not having good boundaries result in? And I think, I think sometimes what happens if you don't have boundaries and you do whatever, you end up getting overbooked, right? Because you want to please everybody. You're a people pleaser. So you don't have a boundary. If somebody asks you to do something, you just do it. You keep on adding things to your list, and then you're not doing what you want. And then you're everybody thinks you're great, but you're not happy because you're not actually fulfilling your own desires. You're like trying to be a helper for everybody.
Well, it's interesting because I was a big people pleaser. Yeah, I was a big people pleaser, and I realized it was manipulation. People pleasing is manipulating other people. I'm going to do something I don't want to do so you like me. And so if you want to really be your authentic self, be your authentic self. Stay out of other people's lanes. What they think of you doesn't matter, and only matters the strikes you're throwing in your lane. Stay out of their lane. Stay in your lane.
There's also the other thing. I think a lot of people end up being in a codependent relationship, and then they think, well, it's easy for them to, maybe it's not easy, but they get stuck in the pattern. So it's like it's a pattern, but it's not a good pattern. It's making them feel bad, but they don't have the strength to get out of the pattern because they're fearful of what would happen if I get out of that pattern. So how do when you're getting to that kind of state, like what is going to make you want to get out of that pattern that you're less fearful of what comes next than where you are?
Again, awareness is the key. What am I saying to myself about this? Am I saying that I can't live without this person? Is that true? Am I saying that this person's happiness is more important than mine? Is that true? Start writing down what you're saying to yourself. Codependency is all about that, is about, me being on your side of the street. Because if you're happy, then I can be happy. But if I'm in my side of the street, that my happiness is my job, not your job. And boundaries are huge. Those bumpers are the boundaries that I talk about on the bowling lane. Those are the
Mhm.
boundaries. Don't let
Yeah.
anyone in, and don't cross over into theirs. If you're saying to somebody, oh, I want to help you with this, or, maybe you need help, you're over on their side. They'll ask you if they need help. Whose side are you on at that point? Just keep asking yourself, whose lane am I in? That's a huge help. That's a big help.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of look at it as like you're being manipulative when you're trying to be the helper because you're trying to get them to be kind of indebted to needing you. And that's your kind of way in. And I don't think people look at that maybe that way all the time. They think it's like, well, that's always going to be positive.
Right.
But it's like, and when you related it was not, that's not that positive. If it's the way
No.
you're going into it that way, like it appears maybe on the surface, you think it's positive. But when
Right.
you dive into it, you start to see, well, it's deeper than that. It's really not positive. It's not a good behavior. It's actually putting, your happiness at risk and putting you into lanes, like you said, that you don't need
Mhm.
to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you're happy, then I'm happy, is kind of the way that codependency works. My survival depends upon your happiness. Well, that's a really manipulative way to live. How about if my happiness, I'm responsible for my happiness, and that might mean setting some boundaries with you, and that might mean you having to, go through your issue on your own, and me not fixing it for you.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, just stay on my side of the lane, and my job is to be happy, joyous, and free.
Well, I love how you came with this concept of ABC because a lot of times, like if you keep things simple,
Right.
then it makes it easier to actually happen. Because a lot of times you get people get into these processes, and if it's hard to do, then you're probably not going to do it. Right? If it's too hard to get your head around it, then how likely are you to do it? So if you can do something incrementally and you can be consistent, and
Right.
you can be consistent and have something that's easy to remember and easy
Right.
to practice because it's
Right.
like a core thing. It doesn't have the complexity where like, well, I don't know where I am. Right. But if you can break it down to like it's ABC,
Right.
you can I understand that. Right. So that's the I think is like people take these things and they want to go to 0 to 100. And then it's
Right.
like it's too complex and then they're never going to get it done. They get past that 10. And then they're like, oh, I'm done. It's too hard. But
Well,
if you
yeah.
keep it simple, then you make it so it's digestible and it's actually something you could do.
And I don't want to fool people into thinking that's all there is to it, ABC, and then I'm cured. I
No,
did the
no,
work. I, you
you
know, I
still
did the work. I had to go in and find out those beliefs. But once you do the work, then it's easy to just stop it. Just,
yeah.
stop it in its tracks.
You got to cut through the noise, like you said. Like a lot of times
Mhm.
there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of clutter. And if you can give yourself that kind of peace, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of times like your own mind is giving you all this noise. I
Yeah.
mean, we have a lot of noise in social media, but your own mind is like racing, and this is where like spiritual practices are, mindfulness or meditation and breathing, things are more Eastern practices. Sometimes will allow you to have that space to get that noise out. And
Right.
I would find as an artist, like creativity comes from actually taking time to declutter, get rid of the noise, to have a quiet space.
Yeah.
From that quiet space, things come.
Yeah.
But you can't be in like a really noisy in your head moment where you're just like your mind's racing all of these things. It's like if nothing happens. It's like once you get the clarity of having some peace, then something will happen
Right.
if you
And
listen to it.
exactly. I just want to say one thing. Pain is not your normal state. If you're living with pain and think that that's the way you're supposed to live, or that's the way you're always going to live, that is not true. Do whatever you can to find your way out of that thinking, because
Mm,
you don't have to live with pain. You don't have to live beating yourself up. You can live like that free child who just, when I was a kid, I would just paint, and the hours would go by. Who knows? Now it's dinner time and I'm out there making perfume and cutting flowers. And that's the state you want to find. That's the normal state of the soul, is a happy, joyous, and free soul.
Well, I hate to have to leave it with that, but we do have another podcast. But I want to encourage people to click the link we have there below when we're published on all the podcast platforms. We're on all the major podcast platforms, so you can either listen or watch anywhere you like to watch podcast or listen to them. We're going to send you a landing page tomorrow that will have all the major places that we are published, and we can send you an MP4 as well, so you can clip it up however you want. But yeah, we're going to be on almost all those podcast platforms by tomorrow. So you'll have that. We were live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and you'll get those. But anybody watching there will have that. Those permanent links will be active as soon as we're done. But thank you again for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Such a great topic. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.